Hello, my name is Anna-Lena Kress, and I'm here with the education team with Quantilope. And today I'm being joined by Madita Brandhorst to talk about the ad optimizer. And Madita, before we dive into that, could you introduce yourself to everyone who's listening to us today?
Of course. Hi, Anna-Lena. Good to be talking with you today. My name is Madita Brandhorst, and I'm responsible for all things category entry points, mental availability, and brand health tracking here at Quantilope, working very closely together with our product team, also on new innovations like our ad optimizer that we're going to talk about today.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that. Yes, leading up to this, we both already talked about the ad optimizer, of course. And I know something that you said was really, really important that people understand is where the ad optimizer actually fits within the three key pillars for ad effectiveness, because I believe it connects to one specific one here. So if you were to give advice to someone who's looking to improve their advertising, what would you say?
As you said, right, there are three key pillars when it comes to ad effectiveness. There's reach or attention, how many people you reach, right, and how well your ad cuts through. Then there's branding, which I think is obvious. Your ad should be branded and clearly communicating your brand and not anybody else's. And then once you have these two down, it really comes down to messaging, what you're communicating. And that last pillar, that messaging part, this is really where the ad optimizer comes in, and it can help you effectively bridge the gap from any long-term brand health tracking that you're doing, where you know what messages you should focus on, to really prioritizing them in any execution that you're doing on the creative side. And as I mentioned before, I'm working here at Quantilope on all things category entry points and mental availability. And I really love that our ad optimizer tool is specifically focusing on measuring how well your advertising communicates relevant strategic category entry points for you.
Perfect. And I believe another point that we have is also understanding where it fits into the overall brand growth system. So we run better brand health tracking studies, and with that, we deliver a mental advantage analysis that we do share with our clients. So where does that all fit? What is the mental advantage analysis, and how is the ad optimizer connected to that?
Yes, of course. So category entry points that we measure in the ad optimizer are really the building blocks of mental availability that we capture as standard in brand health tracking efforts. So the thing is, if you want to grow your brand, you need to grow your brand's mental availability. And that works by connecting your brand through many different category entry points over time. The mental advantage analysis that you mentioned helps brands pinpoint which specific entry points they can focus on by understanding which entry points they already own in consumers' minds, which entry points are owned by competitors, and which entry points are considered what we call white space entry points that are pretty much blank, where no brand has a mental advantage yet, and that provide very fertile building ground for your brand to grow. So as soon as you have that strategic idea of where to grow your brand, that's then where the ad optimizer comes in, because it bridges the gap from strategic to tactical creative execution by allowing you to test whether the ad that you have created really targets and communicates those strategic entry points that you have identified in the tracker.
So tell us a little bit more. Before we run the ad optimizer analysis of our ad, how do we use the results from the mental advantage analysis now so that we know what to look for?
That's a great and super important question. You want to make sure that you communicate what moves the needle on brand growth and not just anything, right? And the mental advantage analysis that you mentioned actually helps with that. Here at Quantilope, we use the so-called 3C framework that was developed by the Aaron Bass Institute to help you make that strategic decision on which entry points to prioritize in your communication. It identifies priority entry points by weeding out those that would not be the best choice for your brand at this point in time, by removing entry points that are not commonly encountered by consumers, by removing entry points that are not credible for you as a brand, given your heritage and portfolio, and by removing those that are not competitive, meaning that there are already brands communicating strongly around this, and it would be harder for you to move in. And if you kind of weed out entry points following that framework, the analysis will leave you with those that are high priority CEPs for your brand, common, credible, and low competitiveness, which means that these will help you grow your brand's mental availability and your brand over time. So these white space CEPs are exactly what you want to see pop up in the ad optimizer for any given ad.
Perfect. Okay, so now we run the ad optimizer, have my results coming back. On the main page, I can see all of the category entry points. We can see category entry points the ad connected strongly with, what works well, medium, and maybe where we didn't connect at all. So given that we're trying to build out those white spaces, would you say we want to see as many category entry points in the green, like more is more, that are currently connected in the what works well space? Is that?
No, not really, if I'm honest. It's really about kind of less is more when it comes to creating advertising, because research from the Aaron Bass Institute, but also other institutes out there, really shows kind of a recall penalty, if you will, for if you have too many different messages within one ad. So the goal should be kind of single-mindedness for a single ad, but then creating different ads that communicating different CPs over time. So if we're thinking especially about the social world that we're in today with more and more content being shared on social media, you don't want to create one 6-second ad that has like 5, 6 different messages in there, but really focus on one entry point for one of those short 6-second ads. If you have a longer form content, right, thinking maybe 15 seconds, then maybe you can go for 1 or 2 category entry points, or maybe a couple more if you have more time for storytelling and like a 30-second hero ad or like a 1-minute, movie trailer. But you want to make sure that whatever you communicate, it's really highly consistent, very clear and easy to understand. And generally, like I said, less is more. Kind of don't make it a Frankenstein kind of ad would be my
I love
advice.
that. Don't make it a Frankenstein ad. Yeah, that makes sense. So less is actually more. One ad that we ran through the ad optimizer leading up to this was an advertisement for Dial soap, and they actually came back as connected fairly strongly to the category entry point to feel clean. But that was already a space that we're owning a little bit in the mental advantage analysis. What would you say to someone with a result like that?
I would say first and foremost, this is actually common, right? That brands play to their strength and maybe focus on a somewhat more narrow brand positioning. But that's not how you build mental availability very effectively. So my recommendation for Dial specifically, given that they already are strong on this entry point, would be to put that maybe on the back burner, almost like on a lower rotation, and kind of focus on something new, on creating new memory structures, which would, according to science, really help them to grow. So what could be interesting with the ad that they tested is understanding which scenes communicate a different entry point, right? So maybe we could check out which scenes of that ad focus more specifically on morning routine or maybe to feel fresh, which is a white space opportunity actually in the body wash space. And then we can use the AI generated recommendations to understand how we can further strengthen that messaging, and maybe just a new cut of the same material will help them to appeal to a different entry point and therefore grow their brand's mental network. So this is really where AI can come in super handy and allow you to flip the script and focus less on, strengthening those existing memory structures, but really building out new ones to grow your mental availability.
Yeah, love that. Makes perfect sense. And this is a nice bridge for me, actually, because I was going to mention the fact that the ad optimizer also comes back with literally frame by frame AI suggestions on how there would be opportunity to build out the connection to the CEPs a little bit more strongly with some minor changes. And what would you recommend someone to do with those results, with these AI suggestions on how to build those connections out more strongly when they go to an ad agency? What would you say?
Oh, I mean, in an ideal case scenario, I would recommend that they invite the ad agency and take a look at this together, because the AI recommendations can really spark super interesting conversations about storytelling, different arcs, and how the narrative can be combined. So my recommendation would be bring your creative to the table, work on something together and iteratively. And then, of course, within the tool, there's different ways that you can work with it, right? You can look at things like the overall consistency score of a specific CEP or key message that you want to communicate. Focus on the valleys, right? Where that communicative strength dips, and then see what you can improve. Or you can try and understand whether a specific focus CEP that you targeted was not communicated at all, and how you can maybe learn from this in the future. And then I think what's really cool is that the tool also takes into consideration like the storytelling and the narrative. So even if an entry point is not present, and if you're working more on like a problem solution kind of spot or ad, the AI will pick up on that and will still provide recommendations on you on how for you to make that kind of almost contrast with problem and solution stronger. So it's really cool, and there's different ways that allow you to deep dive, either based on overall story flow, peaks and valleys, a specific entry point, or that problem solution start that I mentioned.
Awesome. Super valuable. Thanks so much for sharing that. And before we wrap this up, do you have anything else you want to share that's, on your mind? This is such a new, innovative solution. What is there to be really excited about for the future of brand growth?
Yes, actually, I have some last thoughts, so to say. I started out in ad pre-testing, actually more than 10 years ago. I wrote my bachelor's thesis on ad pre-testing back in the day. And like 10, 15 years ago, we were mainly facing kind of one clear hero creative, typically like 20 to 30 seconds long. It would be broadcast on linear TV, right? Broad reach, one clear hero creative, and, having loads of eyeballs on it. And in the last 10, 15 years, that has changed massively. And that strategy back in the day, it doesn't work anymore. It's not about that one hero creative that is 20, 30 seconds long. It's much more about short form content, right? Much more about social and about smaller pieces of content, maybe 6 seconds, but then having a whole portfolio of options to choose from to kind of still that hunger for fresh content. So obviously brands had to adapt to this new reality and kind of the TikTok world that we live in. And so does ad pre-testing. So does the insights side. And we also need to evolve. We can't, have very pricey, premium, slow ad tests anymore like we had 10 or 15 years ago. We need to make sure that there is different tools like AI, like our ad optimizer, that allow brands to test a lot of different short form content pieces very, very rapidly and provide specific, actionable real time ideas for improvement. So from my perspective, this is kind of where we need to adapt as an industry. And at the same time, we of course need to make sure that whatever we're doing is not just AI usage for the sake of it, but that it's still rooted in scientific rigor and in proven principles for brand growth. And I think this is what we have done quite well with our ad optimizer tool, which combines this rapid scale for testing social creatives or all types of creatives actually, with that scientific rigor that is rooted in the laws of brand growth.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you so, so much for sharing all of your expertise today. Really appreciate you joining me.
Of course. Happy to. Thank you, Anna-Lena.
Thank you. Bye-bye.